NBA Finals recap, UFC 264 results, MLB All-Star Weekend preview, and where I've been. All this and more on today's episode of the Sports Porch podcast. Let's get into it. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sports Porch podcast. I hope you are all doing well. My name is Jeffrey Anderson. I will be your host. Man, it's been a while since one of these has been uploaded, huh? I want to say my channel was started just a little over a year ago to this date. So, yeah, man, it has been a while since this channel has been made. It's been a while since I made any kind of content for the Sports Porch. But I'm glad to be back. So, today's episode, we'll be talking a little bit about the NBA Finals. Bucks versus Suns is going on right now. We'll talk about that. UFC 264, biggest combat sports event of the year so far, maybe besides Canelo and that whole affair. We'll talk about that a little bit. MLB All-Star break is here. I'll just give a little bit of a recap on how I guess the MLB has been going, how they've been, for a better of a lack of a better word, getting in their own way. And then we'll also talk a little bit of Formula One. Just give a little bit of an update because we are, I think, about halfway through the F1 season. So I'll give you that. And then at the very end, I'll talk about me, where I've been, all that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get right into it, man. Let's first talk about the NBA Finals. So we've got the Bucks versus the Suns. And going into this series, my thoughts were that I was really hoping that the Bucks would be able to have a good showing. And if I'm being honest, those first two games, I had zero hope. After watching those first two games in Phoenix, I truly thought the series was over. Paul Pierce style. And they weren't giving me a lot of light. Devin Booker and Chris Paul were clearly playing much better than Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, had shown up until that point. Both of those guys have been wildly inconsistent. But I was still holding out a little bit of hope that maybe the Bucks would come back home and show us what they were made of. And that's kind of what they did. Last night, or I guess on Sunday night now, this will go up on Tuesday, the Bucks beat the Suns. I think it was 110-90, somewhere around there. They beat them by 20 points. And to me, this really showed two things. Number one, I think that the Bucks are a slightly better team than the Phoenix Suns are. I think that talent-wise, the combination of Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, and especially Giannis is better than that of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. And that mainly comes down to Giannis, right? Giannis has been the clear best player on the court in this series. I think he's dropped 40 points in every single one of these games so far that he's played in. He's just been on a different level compared to everybody else in this series. Even a guy like Chris Paul, who is, more experienced, and Devin Booker, who is, let's face it, a stone cold killer at this point, almost like this league's version of Kobe Bryant, if you will. But man, the Bucks were inconsistent. It's either Giannis and Chris are having a good game, or Giannis and Drew are having a good game, and one of those two is not. Or it's Giannis that's having a good game, like a really, really good game, and the other two just aren't giving him any help. But in this game, man, everything kind of came together. They locked down Chris Paul and Devin Booker. They all kind of played well as a team. Chris didn't have the best points, but Drew certainly did. He had 21 in this game. Giannis once again had a 40 bomb, proving his worth, man. And I just got to say, if the Bucks can play like that every single game this series, they can come back and win it. My biggest concern, though, is going back to Phoenix, because clearly the environment there makes them play worse, especially Giannis at the free throw line. Even though he shot decent-ish to this point from the stripe, obviously that chanting of his free throw count is going to get in his way for at least a couple of those free throws, especially when you have an entire arena chanting it at you. So that's going to be where I truly test the series, where this true test of the series is going to come into play, right? Whether Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday can be consistent at least 4 games for the Bucks to be able to win. Now, after watching this last game, what is my prediction for this series? I'm still going to predict the Suns are going to win it. As much as I would love to say that the Bucks are going to win this series, and as much as I would love the Bucks to win this series, being a Bucks fan myself, I have to give the Suns the benefit of the doubt. They've been the more consistent team. They've got the more consistent players. Their team as a whole is more of an actual team. It's more of a team effort. You can have guys like Devin Booker have an off game as long as Chris Paul is still there and Mikal Bridges and Cam Payne, who will go on these stretches where he thinks he's Michael Jordan. You also have DeAndre Ayton, who's a beast in the post, doing that pick and roll action with either Booker or Paul, especially Paul. Point is, I trust the consistency of the Suns more than the Bucks. I'm just happy the Bucks are able to make it look like it'll be somewhat of a series, because after I said, like those first 2 games, I was not 100% sure on how much it would be a series. So those are kind of my thoughts right now on this series for the Bucks versus the Suns. Like I said, I'm hoping that the Bucks can win it. Being from Wisconsin, man, this is the first time I've ever seen them in the finals, let alone winning a title. The last time they won a title was in 1971. My dad wasn't even born yet. And then the last time that they went and competed for finals was in 1974, which is the year my dad was born, and they lost in Game 7 to the Celtics. So I'm hoping the Bucks can make something out of this series, but we'll just have to wait and see, basically. So those are my thoughts on the NBA. Let me know what you think. Who do you think is going to win this series? Do you have the Bucks? Do you have the Suns? As I stated before, I have the Suns, although as a Milwaukee fan, I would love to be proven wrong by that. Alrighty then. UFC 264. I'll tell you guys what, this was the biggest event of the year in terms of fighting. Like I said earlier, maybe Canelo Alvarez, maybe that event trumps it, him and Billy Joe Saunders. I would put this as a definite second. This has generated the most hype. So let's talk about it. Big event we got to talk about. Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier, that's a hard name to say, beats Conor McGregor at the end of the first round, or I guess you could call it Conor beat himself. If you didn't hear, at the end of round 1, it was looking like a pretty even fight. At one point, Conor went for this jumping guillotine, which kind of brought the fight to the ground, which was really ill-advised, I thought. And at that point, Dustin got the advantage. He got on top. He started throwing these vicious elbows down on Conor. And eventually, if you'll notice, I've heard a couple of MMA pages on YouTube talk about this. If you haven't heard of The Weasel on YouTube, he is a great MMA channel specifically for the UFC. If you're a UFC fan at all, you're doing yourself a disservice by not following his stuff. He's really great. He pointed out that Herb Dean, and I'll talk about Herb Dean in a little bit, but he missed another incident where Conor was cheating, basically. So what was happening was Conor was grabbing on the inside of Dustin's gloves, like up in here. So they have their gloves like taped on so they don't slip. Conor was pulling on those to keep Poirier down to the ground so he could kick him more. And Poirier kept looking at Herb Dean. You could actually see this during the fight. He kept looking at him like, are you going to get this guy's hands out of my gloves or what? And eventually he just let Conor get up. But little did he know that would actually be the end of Conor in that fight. Conor, as we all know, goes for a kick or a punch and then steps back, and his ankle, both sides of it are touching the ground, and his shin starts touching the ground as well. It was pretty gruesome to watch live, I'm not going to lie to you. That was like, oh man, that was a tough one to watch. So it's confirmed now Conor has a broken tibia. He said he's going to be out for at least 6 weeks before he can get back to any kind of training. And I got to say, man, even before Conor went down, I thought that Poirier was going to win this fight. Before this fight started, I thought Poirier was going to win this fight. And let me tell you why. I had talked to a lot of my friends before this fight. And granted, not a lot of them are into the UFC or into MMA. But I've also talked to some people at work. And they said that they thought Conor was going to win it. Here's why I had Poirier winning it. Especially after I watched the press conferences. That's where I really, truly made up my mind about Poirier winning the fight. This was going to be a close fight either way. I think at the end of it, Poirier was only, plus 163 or something like that to win it. It was very close, very even in terms of how Vegas stood about the fight. But I think I had the same kind of opinion as a lot of fans did who were betting on these fights. And that's what we saw. Dustin Poirier was calm. He was cool. He was collected during the entire process throughout. Whereas Conor, especially during those press conferences, he came off as jittery, unsettled, even, a little too off the wall, even for a guy like Conor McGregor, who we've seen talk trash in these press conferences before and things of that sort. Something just felt off about the way that he was doing this. He felt skittish. I just didn't like the look of it. It seemed like Dustin was perfectly comfortable. He seemed like he was the one that was in control of the situation. And he just kept cool the entire time. And that's what really got me to say, okay, I think Dustin's going to win this thing. And I thought that Dustin was going to win it by round 3 or 4 in a knockout. Either that or would have gone to a decision. So obviously the fight happens. And I think the worst part about all of this is now that they're going to have another fight eventually sometime down the road. Which really sucks because I think even in that fight, I think Dustin's going to win again. We saw after the fight, Conor still was talking all this crap about Poirier. Still talking about his wife, whatever that whole ordeal was. And it really came off to me as Conor being kind of a sore loser. I know the dude broke his ankle, and I know that you can't say that Dustin would have won that fight anyway. But I'll tell you what, it sure did look that way. That jumping guillotine was the worst thing Conor did in that fight. Before that, he looked pretty good. He was back to the karate stance. He was throwing kicks, although they weren't calf kicks, which you would have liked to see. But at the same time, man, Dustin got on top of him. He was throwing those elbows. He was really pounding him on top of him. And I just thought that Dustin would have carried that through to the rest of the fight. He's a great boxer. And especially if Conor would have gone back to the old boxing ways, he would have lost that fight indefinitely. So what's next for both of these guys? Well, Dustin Poirier is going to have to fight Charles Oliveira now. That's going to be an incredible fight. I think that's going to go underrated by a lot of UFC fans. A lot of, I guess, more casual fans who don't really follow the sport as well. That's a fight to look out for. Charles Oliveira is a great matchup. He's got a bit of a weak chin. He's amazing on the ground. Dustin doesn't want to go down there with him because I think Charles will tap him out if he does go down to the ground. But also, Dustin is a great stand-up guy. He's a great boxer. Well, we also see Charles can throw some leg kicks. He can punch a little bit, as we saw against Michael Chandler. And we also saw that Charles can fight through adversity. A lot of people thought that fight should have been stopped when it happened. A lot of people thought Michael Chandler should have won that fight in the first round. Somehow Charles recovered and was able to knock Michael Chandler out pretty definitively. So that's going to be an exciting title fight, man. So where should Conor go from here? Well, it's very tough because the lightweight division in the UFC is no joke, man. This is the best division in the UFC now, even without Khabib Nurmagomedov. I mean, I'm just going to read off some names here. Charles Oliveira is your champ. Poirier, Dustin Gaethje, Beneil Dariush, Michael Chandler, Tony Ferguson still is up there, Rafael Dos Anjos, Dan Hooker, Gregor Gillespie, Islam Makayev, that's a hard name to pronounce, Kevin Lee. You've got so many guys stacked in this division that are so good. I think the next fight for Conor he's going to definitely have to win a fight or two before he can fight Poirier again, depending on if Poirier loses the belt or not. I think you at least have to have Poirier fight Oliveira, and then you have to have Conor fight, I would say, one or two guys, depending on if Poirier wins against Oliveira or not. I think if Poirier beats Charles in that fight, then Conor needs to fight two guys in order to get a title fight. And if Poirier loses that fight, then Conor can just fight one guy, and then we can have our fourth fight between the two. So I think some guys for Conor to look at right now would be potentially Tony Ferguson, although I think Tony Ferguson might be a little over the edge now. Rafael dos Anjos is another guy that could be looked at. You could even pair him up against a guy like Michael Chandler or even Justin Gaethje, unless those two get matched up against each other, which I think is a pretty good fight to make. Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler to go up against the winner of Poirier versus Oliveira. So look, man, the lightweight division is super exciting right now. I think the UFC in general is super exciting to watch right now. And I would recommend, if you're looking to get into combat sports, I think that this was a really good place to start from. There's a lot of good storylines going on within the sport right now. A lot of new faces, a lot of new champions, but you've also got some guys who have been there for a while. You've still got the likes of Max Holloway. You've got the mystery of if John Jones is going to come back. Francis Ngannou being champ. Israel Adesanya going on an absolute rampage through the middleweight division. Things are looking good for the UFC right now, man. And their momentum is only going up from here. Love him or hate him, you got to admit Dana White really took advantage of the COVID situation. And I think the UFC was really the only brand in terms of the sports world to come out of COVID doing better and on a better level than they were before. And this just showed it to me, man. I forgot what Dana said the gate was. I think he said it was like 16 million or something like that. Crazy number. And so yeah, it was a good card overall, I thought. Obviously, the big draw was a little bit of a letdown, but there are a couple other fights I want to talk about. Gilbert Burns beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in 3 rounds via decision. He took Wonderboy down 3 times. That hasn't happened since, I can't remember what they said, but it has been, there's only 2 other guys, I think, who have taken Wonderboy down more than once. And that really was what won Gilbert Burns the fight. He was a better wrestler. Wonderboy is arguably the best stand-up guy in this division. He's got that point karate style that he likes to run with, while Gilbert Burns more of a wrestler, but he can also punch a little bit. We also had Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa beating Greg Hardy, knocking his lights out. You always love to see that. Greg Hardy getting beat up on. That was a vicious KO. Greg Hardy tagged Bam Bam. He was on his way back, stumbling. Greg Hardy came in for the kill with his hands down. Bam Bam snuck in a left hook, and that put his lights out while he was not even on the canvas yet. And actually, when he hit the ground, it looks like that woke him back up. But that was great to see. You also had Sugar Sean O'Malley beating Chris Moutinho. Chris Moutinho, man, he was the guy of the night. He was a walking punching bag, but in a good way. He kept taking Sean O'Malley's punches, which we know he has knockout power. He's one of the top prospects in the bantamweight division, and he just kept going through them, man. Herb Dean also showed once again why he can be such a terrible ref at times, stopping this fight with 30 seconds to go after Chris Moutinho had already taken so much punishment. It's a terrible look on his part. Then lastly, another one I wanted to mention, Michel Pereira beating Nico Price via decision. A lot of people thought this one should have been on the card. I think so as well. This should have been a main event. Or not a main event, but it should have been on the pay-per-view. This was an exciting fight. Not quite as full throttle as we thought it might have been, but Michel Pereira at one point even did like this backflip stomp thing while Nico Price was on the ground, so that was interesting to see as well. So UFC 264, as I said before, I thought overall it was a good card. We had some fights that really excited, some fights that were kind of duds, and some fights that were just disappointing. Some fights that didn't give us what we wanted, especially McGregor Poirier, which, like I said, is unfortunate because now they're going to have to run it back. Even though I think Conor is not, I don't think that he's going to be able to beat Poirier coming back if he fights him again. Real quick, I just wanted to interclip, I guess, is that what you would call it, in this little segment. I completely forgot to talk about the Euros. The Euros happened this weekend. I was going to talk about them. I just completely forgot. So I think I'll put this before the F1 talk, maybe even before the MLB talk. I am a soccer fan. I haven't followed it as closely as I would have liked to this past year. But I did see the Euros happen this weekend, the final. Man, those poor Brits, man. They cannot catch a break. For those of you who don't know the matchup, it was Italy versus England, and England has had this long-running tradition of saying it's coming home. Anytime they are close to the final, anytime the World Cup comes along, really any international event that England is in, they're going to say it's coming home. And they lost in penalty kicks. So what happens in a soccer match, or football match, with that level of pedigree is you have your regular time, the 45-45. You have 2 extra halves of time, which are, I think, 25 minutes each. Wow, I really haven't watched soccer in a while. I don't remember that even. But I think there's 2 legs of that. I think they're 15 minutes each, something like that. Soccer fans, let me know in the comments. Remind me of what it is. And then after that, you go to penalty kicks. Because you can't have a draw in the final, right? So penalty kicks is it's super long already. So the English fans were it was at Wembley Stadium as well, which is in England. So to lose like that on penalty kicks, where Italy had missed one earlier, and then England had the chance to win it, but then they got theirs blocked, I think. And then they got theirs blocked again to lose. That is heartbreaking. That is just the most heartbreaking fashion that you can lose the Euros in, especially for someone like England, who this is really the only thing probably that they look forward to all year is watching English soccer. They have a good team. Harry Kane, Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho. You've got a lot of good players on this team, man. And the way that they just consistently find ways to bottle it, there's another British term for you. It's hilarious. And I love talking about England. I love talking about English football because it is so funny when their fans especially think that they're going to win events like this, and then in just a heartbreaking fashion they crumble and collapse. So that was all I wanted to say on that. I just had to put that in there real quick. I had to mention the Euros and give my 2 cents on that. So congrats to Italy. And as they say, now it's coming to Rome. Back to the rest of the podcast. Let's go ahead, move on to the MLB All-Star Weekend. So I just want to real quick, I want to talk about the MLB a little bit in general. So this has been an interesting year for baseball. That's the best way to say it, because the MLB can't seem to get out of its own way. Look, they've got some exciting teams. You've got the young White Sox, who have a lot of star power. You've got Boston making a resurgence. Houston seeming to prove everybody wrong after the whole trash can incident, proving that they're still a good team even with that happening. You've got Tampa Bay doing their thing as per usual. The Giants coming out of nowhere this year to have the best record in baseball. The Dodgers as well doing their thing. My Milwaukee Brewers are doing pretty well this year. And one of the brightest stars in the game, Shohei Ohtani, having an insane MVP season. And you've got guys, even though he just got hurt with an ACL injury, like Ronald Acuna, Fernando Tatis also, and DeGrom having another miraculous pitching season. But the MLB can't seem to get out of its own way. For those who didn't hear the story earlier in the season, the MLB had a bit of a spider tack problem. Now, what is spider tack? Those of you might be asking. Spider tack is a foreign substance that is put on the baseball by pitchers to increase spin rate. Spin rate is the thing that helps pitchers to control their pitches better, to give them more drop, more zip, just more movement overall, making it harder for hitters to know where it's going to go. And so what happened was, just in the middle of the season, after they hadn't been doing anything the entire time, the MLB decided they were going to do something. So now they're checking people. There was a clip a couple weeks ago when this started. Max Scherzer got checked like 3 times in a game. I think at one point he even like unbuckled his pants when they came out for the 3rd time, which that was a little weird, but it makes sense. You know, the entire time he had been dealing with it, probably was getting a little bit tired of it, as I'm sure you would. And it seemed as if they were trying to scapegoat some guys. Trevor Bauer in particular, although he's got a whole nother thing going on right now with him. And Garrett Cole, those guys seem to be the main 2 that they were trying to out. Kind of similar to how they handled the steroids era of the MLB with guys like Barry Bonds, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. Or not even Mark McGwire. They still have kind of a positive opinion on him. But the point is I think that they've gone on a very similar route to that, where they have let these pitchers get away with using foreign substances for years and years and years. And because it's been working, and because they're still raking in the money, the MLB hasn't done anything about it. Now this year, you've got averages are at an all-time low. The offense is super low, besides some guys who are just raking with the home runs. And now you've got guys complaining. So what does the MLB do? Middle of the season, they start cracking down on it, acknowledging the problem. I would have been okay if they would have maybe made a statement about it, say we're looking into this and we'll give you more later. But to do it in the middle of the MLB season, just the middle of it, why? What's the point of that? What is that accomplishing? I mean, you couldn't wait until the end of the year to do something about this? And I understand the argument where it's like, yeah, they should do something about it. Sooner is better. Then why didn't they do anything before the season when they had already known? It seems for a very long time that stuff like this was pretty common. The MLB, man, they just get in their own way. People think Roger Goodell is a bad commissioner of the NFL. They need to look a little more at Rob Manfred. Rob Manfred has repeatedly messed up with the Astro situation, now with the foreign substances situation, where I think the guy that they even suspended, he's only suspended for like 2 weeks or something like that without pay. I can't remember exactly what the circumstance was. Let me look it up real quick. Some guy, who was it? We're getting there. I'm just trying to figure out the player. I think, was he a Mariners guy? Something like that, where he got suspended for a little bit. And what kind of precedence is that setting? That you're going to let people get away with it? It's kind of the same thing with the sign stealing for the Astros. They only got, AJ Hinch was fired, not even by the team. Like, he didn't even get suspended by the MLB. He just got fired by the team. And then now he's already with the Tigers again. Same thing I think is happening with Alex Cora, where he was fired for a year, and now he's back, I think, with the Red Sox, or with the Red Sox. So it's mind-boggling. Truly, it's mind-boggling. The length that the MLB will go to not care about anything. Another issue they're having is umpires. The umpires this year have been dreadful. People are complaining about the NBA, and the NBA refs have been, I think, pretty bad as well. They've really slowed the game down a lot, calling a lot of ticky-tacky fouls, James Harden, Trae Young, Luka Doncic, calling all of their crap. But then you look at the MLB, man, and these guys go on such power trips. It is unbelievable. You cannot do anything. You can't look at an ump wrong. You can't yell at them. You can hardly do anything nowadays, and you're out of the game. They have such thin skin for how badly some of them do their jobs, i.e. Angel Hernandez. Comes to mind to me as the worst offender of this. So, with all that out of the way, this has still been a very exciting year for the MLB. Mike Trout has been great as always. We've got Shohei Ohtani doing something that's never been done in the All-Star game before, DHing and pitching as well. That's insane. Vlad Guerrero Jr. has come alive this year. The Red Sox have come back. You've also got the likes of, as I said before, Jacob deGrom is on an absolute tear. My Milwaukee Brewers have been doing pretty well as well. The Giants have been having what looks like a World Series type year. And I just real quick want to read off some standout All-Stars to me. First off, Buster Posey. I mean, he hasn't been on an All-Star team in a very long time. And this year, he has really been a key figure, a key veteran presence for this Giants team. Nolan Arenado coming over from St. Louis, or from Colorado to St. Louis, where the All-Star game is being held this year. I'm curious to how big of a standing ovation he's going to get in comparison to basically anyone else, considering he's from Colorado originally. But he's really proving how bad of an organization Colorado is, how bad the Rockies are for letting him walk. Adam Frazier for the Pirates has really been the only bright spot for what has been arguably the worst team in baseball, besides Arizona, which that's a pretty low level to stoop to. You also have the likes of Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns, two guys from the Brewers, especially Woodruff, who has been really great this year. He would be the Cy Young winner in the NLS up to this point if it wasn't for a guy named Jacob deGrom. And just because of the fact that I want Woodruff to win a Cy Young, I think they should give the Cy Young to Woodruff and the MVP to deGrom. deGrom has just been that special this year. I know that's not how it works. I wish that's how it worked. Otherwise, I would love to see it go that way. Kevin Gausman of the Giants has been absolutely outstanding. Josh Hader has been easily the reliever of the year so far. After I was kind of on the fence about him 1 to 2 years ago of him being a little bit spotty, he's been excellent this season. Craig Kimbrell has had a bit of a revival in the Cubs, in their bullpen this year as well. Sorry about that, taking a drink of water. You also got the likes of Joey Gallo making another All-Star appearance, someone who finally learned how to hit something other than home runs a year ago, and has seemed to continue that trend up until this point. So that's all I have for you on the MLB talks. It's been an interesting year for the MLB. While there's been some good stuff, I think the bad outweighs it, unfortunately. They just do it to themselves, man. By not addressing the issues sooner and just kind of, throwing it underneath the rug, MLB really shoots themselves in the foot. So, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes with them. But I think one of these days, all this stuff they're doing is really going to come down hard on them. And so, we'll see, man. I hope they get their stuff figured out. That's all I can say. All right, let's go ahead then and talk about the not the MLB. I just talked about that. Let's talk about F1. This season has had interesting results. So just real quick, looking at the team standings, you will notice there is someone new on top. Red Bull has 286 points, while Mercedes has 242 points. Excuse me. McLaren is in third with 141, while Ferrari is in fourth with 122. And then after that, everything kind of drops off, and all those guys are kind of competing with each other down there. So let's talk about Red Bull first. They have been the fastest team this year. Max Verstappen is the fastest driver on the grid right now. He's got 182 points, while Lewis Hamilton only has 150 up to this point, which is something crazy. I mean, we never thought... I honestly wasn't sure I would see it this year. I mean, people had talked about Red Bull being the top dog this year, but with how it went at the beginning, I really wasn't so sure about how true that was going to be. I thought with how the beginning of the season went, Lewis might get a little trouble from Max here and there with a couple of races, and then Lewis would end up just winning the whole championship like he has for the past however many years up to this point. He's just been so dominant. But Max really has been the fastest car out there, it's impressive. It's impressive to see how Red Bull have finally, it seems, gotten over the hump, or at least on the same level, at the very least, with Mercedes. So that's great for them. McLaren has been great this year. Lando Norris is fourth in the driver rankings with 101 points, just behind Sergio Perez at Red Bull, who has 104. I think that he has been the driver of the year so far. He has really proven he can do so much with what is a third place to fourth place car every single race. His teammate Daniel Ricciardo is in 8th place with 40 points. And if I'm being honest, if Daniel Ricciardo can step up his performances next year, I think this McLaren team could really take themselves out of the 3rd to 4th range to the 3rd to 2nd range. I'm not saying they'll be awfully close to Mercedes, but I think that if Ricciardo can just step up his performances a little bit with the team, then they can be challenged in the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull instead of hanging back with Ferrari and AlphaTauri. Speaking of Ferrari, they have been, for Ferrari standards, not very good this year, but definitely better than last year was. They are 4th in the standings. Charles Leclerc has obviously been their best driver. He's 6th with 62 points behind the big names such as Lando, Sergio, Lewis, Max, and then Valtteri Bottas, who is in 5th place in terms of points. And real quickly, just talking about him a little bit, I think from what I've seen, this is his last year on the team. I think that next year, with all the animosity that has gone on between him and Mercedes, with how desperately Mercedes loves Lewis Hamilton, which makes sense, by the way. They have every right to love Lewis. He's a great driver. He is a better driver than Valtteri is. But because of that, Valtteri has always been kind of put to the wayside and has really been treated like that number 2 driver. And I think he wants to be treated like a number 1 driver. And I think this year it's just kind of been boiling over. We've seen it and heard it with the team comms, with the team strategies of Lewis continuing to win races and Valtteri just not. So I think next year George Russell comes in to replace him. That's going to be exciting, man. It's going to be really fun to watch him and Lewis Hamilton compete against each other. We saw a little bit of what George can do last year at, I think, Azerbaijan. Was that where he raced at, where Lewis got COVID? Something like that. But anyway, back to Charles Leclerc. He has elevated this Ferrari car. And then Carlos Sainz, just to put this into perspective, has 60 points on the year compared to last year. Sebastian Vettel not doing as well. And I just want to say that Carlos Sainz definitely made the right move going to Ferrari. Even if McLaren isn't doing, or even if McLaren is having a really great year this year, for Ferrari to be so close to them, Ferrari's at 141 points while McLaren is at 122. And this is probably considered the worst that it can get for Ferrari other than last year. Whereas for McLaren, this is like a banner year. This is something they can hang their laurels on, something you can hang your hat on. And this has so far been an excellent year for them. So, I mean, he's also definitely getting paid more. He is with objectively a bigger brand in the Scarlet Red than he is with McLaren. You know, as big as McLaren has gotten, especially in the United States, I think. There have been a lot of Lando Norris fans that I've seen, and a lot of Daniel Ricciardo fans as well, two of the most popular drivers on the circuit. So that's kind of hard to go against in that regards. So I think that besides, who was I saying earlier? I think besides Lando Norris, I would say Pierre Gasly has proven himself to be another guy up for Driver of the Year. Consistently race in, race out for AlphaTauri, he has put his car in a great position. He is currently 9th in the standings right now, just below Daniel Ricciardo. And Yuki Tsunoda has really been, since that first race, a bit of a disappointment so far in F1. I'm going to give him a little more time, but he has not been good. And then how about Fernando Alonso, just below Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin, who is at Alpine and has really, in qualifying especially, put that car in a spot to compete every single week. Meanwhile, the team has not been putting itself in a spot to compete. They are 7th right now in the standings with just 32 points. I think that they're going to finish at that spot. I don't see them beating the likes of Aston Martin or AlphaTauri. Maybe if they get Esteban Ocon to get going a little bit in these races, I think he might have a potential to help them climb back out, because I think Fernando Alonso to this point has been doing everything that he can to make the best of this team and to make this team perform at its highest level. And I think that's crazy to say, with him being off for a year and racing at IndyCar, that he's able to still have such good drives in a car that he hasn't even really truly gotten used to yet. So that's just impressive not by Alpine, by Fernando Alonso. And we'll see where they go from here, man. It's going to be real interesting after they let Ricciardo walk, or after he left them, just to see if they can recover from that, and to see if they can even make any runs again at 5th or even 4th for that matter. So, otherwise, down at the bottom of the grid, you got Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas. Haas has easily been the worst team this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gene Haas, who is the owner right now. He is also big on the American side of things. He owns Haas Motorsports, or Haas Racing, whatever it is. In NASCAR, they're a big team there. And whatever the case may be, I think he's going to leave after this year. And we've seen a play for Nikita Mazepin's dad to take over this team. And I think that's going to happen. As unfortunate as it is, money talks in the sport. And we're going to see, unfortunately, I think also Mazepin race again next year, who has been just absolutely abysmal. He has been easily the worst driver on the grid this year. He is such a D-bag to everybody. He is a spoiled little brat when it comes to racing. And that's all I'm going to say about Nikita Mazepin. Mick Schumacher's got some potential there. But that's my F1 recap so far throughout the year. Red Bull looks like they're poised to win this year, unless Mercedes has some miraculous comeback and really starts pressing Red Bull very hard, starts pressing Max, getting more 1-2 finishes. If they can get a couple more of those, they might make it interesting. And I hope they make it interesting. I don't want Red Bull to just run away with it like Mercedes has. But either way, it's going to be exciting to hopefully see Red Bull win the championship. All right, that's all I have for actual show content. So if you don't want to hear any of what I'm about to say next, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about where I've been, what's been going on with the channel, and basically where I'm at in life. So let's go back to, you know what, I'm going to pull up the channel itself. I'm just going to pull up my channel dashboard so I can get a little bit of so I can just look back throughout the content on this channel. So let's see here. So September 4th of last year was the last time I uploaded a podcast episode. A true Sports Porch episode. And for those of you who haven't watched my channel before in the past, or I assume a lot of people who are watching then are still watching now, are still subscribed. That's my core audience. After that point, it felt like covering all the sports that I was covering was getting over cumbersome. It was getting to be too much, and I really thought I was stretching myself thin trying to talk about a bunch of different stuff rather than just talking about one or two things. And also the channel performance was not the best, to say the least. I was lucky to be getting over double digits on my videos, on the clips I would upload from the podcast. It just wasn't very good. So after this point, I waited about 20 days and I started uploading mainly football content. And immediately there was an uptick in my views. I went from getting the most views on any video I'd had up until that point, being like 20 on a random podcast clip, to immediately going to 13 to 24 on the video after that, 21, 30, just getting more consistent view counts. So I stuck with it, and I stuck with the football stuff, and I really enjoy it. And basically what I'm trying to say with this whole segment is that this is still going to be a football YouTube channel. So I'm not going to be doing like I did before, where every video that comes out is going to be a podcast episode. This is going to be either at the beginning of the week or at the end of the week. I'm thinking these are going to be uploaded on Mondays and Tuesdays. One of those 2 days, you're going to see a podcast episode. That should be pretty consistent, weekly, bi-weekly, whatever. Just to diversify my upload stuff, to still talk to you guys about things that I want to talk about in terms of sports. Because there are other sports than football, and when football season isn't here, I mean, it can really get dry. If you'll see on YouTube right now, it's really hard to find football content, unless you're just, doing predictions on fantasy or whatever the case may be. So, sometime whenever I got home last, so I was at school, and I came home, and I'm not going to lie, I was kind of defeated. I've been looking for internships. As I've said before, I am in the sports communication program here it is. Oh, sorry, I just flipped for the camera. University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And I was looking for stuff, and I didn't get anything. So I was really just kind of defeated. I came back home, and I uploaded a couple of videos here and there. As you saw, I think I uploaded one about my favorite picks in the draft, a Julio Jones video, and that's been it. I've been radio silent ever since. And that really was a result of three things. So number one, I work, the place I work at, it's either second shift or third shift, and I'm back on third shift right now. So what I do is I work 9:30 to 5:30, 9:30 p.m., 5:30 a.m., and then come home and sleep until like 2 or 3, and then go back to work the next day. So that is a grind of a job, man. It's a yogurt factory. I don't hate the job itself, but it's in a factory all night. You can't have your phone on the floor. You're just disconnected from everything that isn't this factory. And it really is draining. It made me not want to do anything. I really felt just unmotivated to do stuff. Number two, I also, a bright side of being home was that I was able to do I'm doing a little bit of intern work now with my local radio station. So that has kind of taken up a couple of my weekends here and there. I started doing that stuff late June. So I've been calling some baseball games here and there. I've done a couple of reports for them, a couple of raps, things like that for the radio station. So that's taking up a little bit of my time. And then number 3, it's just hard for me to find times to record. Mainly, or it was hard for me to find times to record. This mic is a condenser mic, for those who don't know. It's an Audio-Technica AT2020. And it's a condenser mic, so it picks up a lot more background space, whatever. I still want to get a dynamic microphone. I'm just looking for one around the $100 range. The next mic I get is either going to be a Rode Pod mic or the Shure SM58, which is a legendary dynamic microphone. But all this being said, what I'm trying to say is that none of this is really an excuse for the lack of uploads on my channel. Like I said, they're just excuses. They have been, and going forward, I'm hoping that I can be more consistent on this stuff. So what I've come up with is a bit of a schedule. I might put something on the screen here for those of you watching now, maybe not. Every Monday or Tuesday, you're going to see the Sports Porch podcast. You're going to see a podcast episode uploaded in some way, shape, or form. And then Wednesdays and Fridays, you should see a football-related video. Now, I have a couple ideas for 2 different series I want to do, where I think I can fill the gap until the NFL starts, and we can do power rankings, predictions, a little bit of fantasy talk maybe here and there. So that's really my roadmap going forward. That's my roadmap as of right now. So that's all I have. That's kind of my life update. That's what I wanted to tell you guys about. And I just want to say, first off, thank you to everyone who has watched, listened over this past year and a couple days. My channel shouldn't have 25 subscribers for how little I've uploaded. I think I counted earlier. I made like 30-something videos over a year span. For as low effort, really, as my content is, that's not a lot. And I just want to say thank you to you guys for tuning into it and watching it. I'm hoping to be a lot more consistent this channel year. I'm hoping to upload at least twice a week, if not 3 times if I can, with that aforementioned roadmap. So that's that. Once again, thanks for watching, everyone. That's all I have. If you want to, follow me on Twitter at JeffreyA2017. That is going to be the best spot where you're going to be able to hear from me, get in touch with me, talk with me on sports. That's also my Instagram handle as well, if you want to follow me over there. Make sure to give this podcast a follow. I believe it's also available on Apple Podcasts now, so if you're listening to it on there, I think they have a review system, so if you want to go ahead and give that a review, you can do that. Make sure you follow the podcast as well, from wherever you're finding it at Real Sports Porch on Instagram as well. And then make sure you're liking and subscribing on this video, turning on those notifications so you never miss another upload. Let me know what you guys thought of me bringing back the Sports Porch podcast today. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments below. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.